and welcome to another episode on Energy Explained, where we're talking about state electricity markets. In my last episode, I talked about the game-changing events that took place in 2023 with the constitutional amendment and the enactment of the Electricity Act in Nigeria. Those two events have changed the tide of things within the electricity markets in Nigeria. And I promise that in this episode, I'll be taking you through the process of moving, from centrally regulated by the NERC, that's NERC, Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, to being regulated by the State Electricity Regulatory Commission. My name is Olajumoke Delano. I'm an energy lawyer and international consultant, and I'll be walking you through the process of creating a state electricity market. The law allows states to name their state electricity regulatory commissions by whatever name they choose. And so we even have, for examples, Abia State Electricity Regulatory Authority. There's a regulatory bureau in Ekiti State. So different names, can be called. So I was going to tell you, what does the Electricity Act say? If a state wants to move from being centrally regulated to beginning to regulate its own activities, there are a couple of steps that were put within the Electricity Act, and I'll tell you about them. The first one is that the state has to enact its own state electricity law. It's not enough that the Constitution has been amended, giving state houses of assemblies the power to make laws for generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity. They actually have to enact a law for their own state electricity market. So that's the first thing they need to do. The second thing they need to do is to establish a state electricity regulatory commission who is going to be responsible for regulating this state electricity market that is being formed. So these are two critical prerequisites that a state has to have completed before it starts the process of creating its own state electricity market. Interestingly, the portion of the Electricity Act that I'm referring to is Section 230 of the Electricity Act. Now, this particular section lists out the processes for creating a state electricity market. And I'll be walking you through the process of creating a state electricity market. Now, interestingly, while those are the two major prerequisites, there are other things that need to be done, even within this section 230 of the Electricity Act. So, enactment of the state electricity law is one, mandatorily. The second one is the establishment of the State Electricity Regulatory Commission, and also staffing. So it's not enough to just set up a State Electricity Regulatory Commission in name without staffing it. And staffing and equipping it means that you need to appoint the officers of that commission. You need to appoint the commissioners, the management, the staff. You need to equip them, for the job they're coming to do, which is creating a State Electricity Regulatory Commission. It's important also that the law that is being enacted has to be a law that is robust enough to create a state electricity market and not just a law that provides for the establishment of the commission. So establishing the commission within the law that is enacted is good, but it must also provide for more than the law. I've seen laws from a couple of states, at least a particular state where the law was primarily focused on setting up the State Electricity Regulatory Commission. But there's so much more to creating a state electricity market than just setting up the commission. So there must be a law, a state electricity law. Then the commission must be established, set up, and equipped. And then it's important for the state to notify the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, that's the national regulator, requesting for transfer of regulatory responsibility for the electricity market in that state to the State Electricity Regulatory Commission. Now, let me tell you something about energy. There are so many acronyms. So we have the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, and then we have the State Electricity Regulatory Commission, SERC. So when I say NERC, I'm referring to the national regulator. When I say CERC, I'm referring to the nation. Just keep up with me. It's very interesting. So the state has to notify the NERC, national regulator, please transfer regulatory responsibility, to me. And there is a whole 6-month process after which the national regulator receives the notification that it must prepare to hand over to the State Electricity Regulatory Commission. Other actions that must be taken is that there must be a notification sent to the Bureau of Public Enterprises, the National Council of Privatization. Now, these two entities, the NCP, National Council of Privatization, is the board of the Bureau of Public Enterprises. And you may wonder, why is that important? Well, they are shareholders within the distribution company that services the state that is now requesting for transfer of regulatory authority. Notification must also be sent to the distribution company servicing that area. The distribution company must be notified that one of the states that you are serving has requested for a transfer of regulatory authority to itself. And so the distribution company within that state is now responsible for creating a subsidiary company. You may wonder, why is this important? I'll give you a bit of context. For example, Abuja Electricity Distribution PLC, it's called Abuja, but it actually serves 4 areas. It serves the Federal Capital Territory, serves Niger, serves Nasarawa, and serves Kogi. So when a state, for example, Nasarawa, writes to the national regulator and says, I want to create my state electricity market, a notification must also be sent to Abuja Electricity Distribution Company that they need to create a subsidiary where all the assets, liabilities, employees, contractual rights and obligations that are within Nasarawa State will be transferred to this subsidiary company that Abuja Electricity Distribution Company sets up. So that is why notification goes to NERC, notification goes to BPE as a shareholder, and the NCP, which is the board of BPE. Notification goes to the distribution company itself, asking them to create a subsidiary where all the assets, the whole idea is to ring fence the assets, liabilities, employees, contractual rights and obligations within an entity, one entity, a separate entity from Abuja Electricity Distribution Company that houses, with the example of Nasarawa State, everything relating to Nasarawa State in a subsidiary for that purpose. So that is one of the things that must be done as a prerequisite to the transfer within the 6 months period. I'm excited about the powers that have been given to states to create their electricity markets, to make laws, for State House of Assembly to make laws. However, it is an option. It's an option within the law. Where a state elects not to create its own electricity market, it can just choose to remain with the National Electricity Regulatory Commission. And so it will not create its own electricity market. But a state that intends to must necessarily take these steps before it can begin to create its own electricity market. So that's a very interesting point. So we have some states, even as of now, over 15 states have shown their intention to create their own state electricity markets. But Nigeria has 36 states, meaning there's still a lot more that are still opting to remain centrally regulated than those who have decided to take their destinies into their own hands. I know some states want to see how the first movers perform before they decide, whether they want to create their own state electricity markets. Like, okay, states who have gone ahead, Enugu, Abia State, Akwa Ibom, I want to see how you're doing before. And I mean, that it's totally within, their rights to be able, to do so. Now, in sharing the assets, I mentioned the fact that a new subsidiary must be created for the distribution company that serves the particular area, and that the assets, liabilities, contractual obligations, and rights and employees must be separated and transferred to that entity. Another thing I need to mention before I round up is the fact that the Electricity Act provides that no taxes will accrue as a result of this creation of subsidiary and transfer of assets, liabilities, employees, that there will be no tax obligations that will be incurred. There's a whole methodology for this transference. What do you think about these game changing events that have happened in the Nigerian electricity supply industry? In the next episode, I'll be talking to you about how are the assets and liabilities shared, even between the different subsidiaries that are going to emerge from each of the distribution companies as each state decides, to create its own electricity market. My name is Olajumoke Delano. Until I come your way again, subscribe to my channel, like and share, even as I bring you more information on the development of state electricity markets on Energy Explained. Take care. Bye.